Um, all right, so I guess with that in mind, and since we've been recording anyway, I will get started and people
Oh,
can join as we go here. So, for anyone listening live or tuning in later, this is Cory and Angela of Delve Collective, which I have teed up in the announcements, is a freelancing collective. And I think that's an interesting enough premise, like right off the cuff, that why don't I just stop there and ask if you can describe what that is and like how that came to exist?
yeah. So I'll start with this. How it came to exist is, last time I was here, we were talking about what are some ways to organize, really, and we still haven't, like, as a group, because we started, freelancing onesie, twosies. We quickly grew to like, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10. Now I think we have like about 15 to 17 people about. Um, and we need to figure out how to organize, how to like actually start sharing resources. Because one mistake I made was I didn't incorporate everybody under me, whether they were just contract to contract or not. I didn't feel like I had like the invoicing system set up. I didn't feel like I had like, my ducks in a row or everything handled on my end to be able to also bring other people under like my company in a way, right? So there's never been any resource sharing, and this was a couple years in the making. And how do we get to some sort of resource sharing, and keep the band together, as it were, get new projects, new clients, new engagements, and from there, um, some of those decisions led us to a collective versus, other words were thrown around like guild, union, co-op, um, yeah, a few others. I don't even know them all, but we landed on a collective because one of the I guess founding principles is everyone wants to keep their own business. You get to make your own choices around healthcare. You get to make your own choices around your 401k, what your tax rate, how much you're taking in owner draws, and lets you have a lot more freedom, than if you were just an employee. With just those decisions based on your paycheck.
Got it. So, as I'm thinking through, what I might be wondering if I were listening, the idea is that everybody who is part of the collective maintains their own individual status as a business owner. Is that fair?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. And so, everybody maintains business owner status, but there is collaboration, and I think that's what we're going to dig into here some. So, I guess, if I think of the ways that this could have been structured, um, one obvious path to go would be to start like a traditional, like app dev kind of agency,
Mm-hmm.
or another might have been to have a much like looser collection of people. What, why the idea of keeping everybody independent? Like, why not just incorporate and then hire employees?
It's what they wanted. Yeah, we
Yeah.
asked, and that's what people were keen for. So another way I will frame us so Cory, if this is helpful in context, when Cory and I sat down and agreed to this, a lot of the work that Cory's done has been internally facing into the collective, and a lot of the work that I've done has been externally facing. So when I talk on business development conversations, I say we're a federation of sorts of higher end technology consultants that own our own businesses. But we've come together because we know our work is good, and a lot of the type of work that we do in the world right now requires cross like team and various skill sets. So if we're going to be out there doing the good work and wanting to do the good work, we need to have people around us that we can trust and like and are familiar with. So that was one of the angles that maybe is helpful in that question.
Yeah.
Sure.
I will say too, if anybody ever decides to start their own thing, one thing we looked in early that would have kept everyone under one company was called a series LLC. It's not enshrined in Michigan case law yet, but in like New Jersey, for example, it is. And that one's very interesting because you start like one shell company at the top, and then you make owners to all the series LLCs, so then they can break apart really easily and have a mechanism for coming in and coming out. That was one thing we were interested in early on because of that same ultimate ownership perspective. But yeah, just because it's not in case law in Michigan, we didn't go with it. So if anybody ever figures that one out, I'm interested personally from a historical perspective to see if that solves some of the problems.
So I guess that's, people want to maintain their independent status, but have an ability to collaborate is the reason that you keep it structured this way. But speaking of the structure, like, what does that look like? How do people, as you get into the teens of different people, I imagine that there have to be collaboration paradigms that can't just be ad hoc, right? Like, there are structures that you've developed.
Yeah. So it's looks like a lot like the U.S. House of Representatives, for better or worse. So we're entirely committee based. When you come into Delve, you start as a provisional committee member of the main committee that houses everybody. And that's the committee that makes like strategic decisions, governance, policies, all that kind of like, how are we going to do this? Is there a form for this? Is there as simple as a checkbox? Who's going to be responsible for this? And then you have subcommittees under that, whether that's digital marketing or client-facing committees. So, and then we have another main committee that's the operations committee, which is like we do a 9-month rotational thing. So people get voted in, and after they serve their term, we'll switch up, do more votes, and just keep like fresh perspectives into that is the idea, and that we give everyone an opportunity to manage the day-to-day of this business.
How did that style of organization emerge? I mean, I imagine there was a time where there were only a handful of people, and that would have been overkill. How did you arrive at that or decide on that?
So every Tuesday, much to probably some people were very sick of our Tuesday meetings. We literally sat down every Tuesday after regular business hours, like I think for like 6 months, maybe a little bit longer, to flesh these systems out and to figure it out. Because one thing that's interesting is while we proposed and started to think about this, as I think it was first Angela and I, like, hey, how might we keep the band together? Okay, let's start the company. It's just you and I, and let's slowly expand it to encompass everybody. And how do we like create those systems? Because we already had, and we still have like people just freelancing independently. Now we're trying to solve like, can we have a model for resource sharing and collaborative decision making that works with all these independent businesses? And kind of another side to that is, and Angela will tell you, very important, we need a brand. And Delve's kind of the brand, the thing that we can all stand behind and say, this is us, we're this.
Just for context for people listening, when you talk about keeping the band together, you're referring to a group of people that you had worked with previously, right?
Yeah, I've kept go on, Angela.
I love this part. So when people ask me, like, when did the Delve Collective start? I'm like, well, that's a really hard question. Some of the working relationships within the, teens of us go back almost 10 years, roughly like 6-7 years. Most of us met at a place called Koehler. I think you might have heard of it too, Eric, where a lot of us got into, the agile design processes and how all of those different cadence meetings work. So we have a lot of the same training, and we've hand selected each other because our work is so good, but we also have a lot of the same values. So, and again, in order to create technology, you need very cross-dimensional skill sets. So we're better off together than we are apart for a lot of different reasons, if we want to be able to actually make things and see it come out into the world. So like we've, of the last 7 years, coming into the last 2.5, how many are over on the other contract now, Corey? 10, 12?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So
then,
about
some are on their own contracts as well, like Brad.
Yeah, true. So, about that for about 2.5 years, we've been working on one project, but then we've officially formalized our relationship arguably about a year ago with the creation of the collective. So in some ways we are super far along and developed to have this like high performing of a team is something that a lot of people just drool over that opportunity to have. But then in other cases, we're still a little bit more junior and figuring our way out. Like our website's a really good example of that. Like we started out with just kind of like I know, Corey, we got a beginning version of it, but that was okay because we didn't really need a website. Most of the people that we were talking to and trying to get projects with were really more based off of my network, and people knew me. They weren't going to be Googling for us at all. Like it was more me talking about like, hey, I've got this lightning in a bottle of a group of people. Like, does anybody want to, take advantage of this and give us a project to focus on? So, it's like 10 years, 6 years, definitely within the last year, but yeah, it's been going on for a while.
Yeah, and I'll say too, for me, like I've always, like when I find people that I want to work with and I enjoy working with, I just bring them to the next place I go. Like I'll name him in case he watches this, Todd Urbanowitz and Jordan. Um, One of my very first jobs, we all worked together, and then I begged them to come to Pillar after I went to Pillar. And then I begged them to come do this after this, right? Like I just keep being like, come work with me, please. I would like to, still work together, and it's been like a, friendship more than colleagues at that point, right?
Corey and I both, oh, sorry, go ahead.
For the audience, like I think the fascinating thing about this is we're talking about a success story, like a kind of corporate populist success story of people working together in an organization. And maybe it sounds like even before the days of Pillar, and then you're collectively bringing more and more people along and eventually exit working for a services business, and you're all independent but still working together, which is really cool. Am I capturing that accurately?
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Like the people that, I want to target with Delve, I think are those that are still kind of, how to say it's not left behind, but they're still out there in the enterprise, and they just, whatever the jump is to get them to come freelance and do this thing and then come work with us again. Like those are like, who I want to like always push towards. And those are the people that I try and stay in contact with. Especially because I used to teach at Grand Circus, so I've hit a few of the students up and been like, "Well, how far along are you in your career yet? Is it time for you to make the leap? What's going on?"
Yeah, Corey and I both like to collect cool people. My specific criteria are folks that are awesome at what they do, exceedingly kind, and want to do good with their time on this world. So I think between the both of us, we've collected folks in different types of skill sets. So it made sense for us to kind of join gears from that crossover and that value for sure.
Yeah.
So speaking of which, I think that's probably a good segue. One of the things I have down to ask is, so you're talking about, sort of a happy path, if you will, like these are people I've known and worked with before. Are there other ways, like how do people join the collective? Is it always via word of mouth and knowing, or like how are you bringing on new members?
Yeah. Well, right now it's word of mouth. Don't go to our website. There's not a hiring page or anything like that. But I would say we Angela, we typically start with like a conversation, and usually it's based on, hey, where are you at right now? What are you thinking about? And just people who right now really reach out, whether they're thinking about switching into technology, I think is a good amount, because a lot of us like to mentor and help people transition to that space. And then some of them are just, they're leaving jobs or they're ready for a new transition. And that just gets the conversation really started as they were looking for something. Usually they either know Angela or me or know somebody previously. So that's like the current thing. What we want to be able to do is, obviously open that up as we, have more and more work, more and more need for, people who want to excel at projects, and that's what drives them, whatever the facet of that project might be, to really just have a conversation with us, get us to know, tell us your passions, because we're probably passionate about it too in some aspect, even if we might not be the ones who execute on that, and then goes from there. I don't know, Angela, how would you phrase that?
Yeah, I would say yes, and to that, like, I think that's totally right, Corey. I found it interesting, even in the last month, the amount of conversations I've had from people who are like, I just want to work with a really good team. Like literally, I've had people that are, you know, like, tell me more about this. You have a really good team. So
Yeah.
I think there's a bit of a craving for when you've got a lot to offer, to be able to direct that energy and create the thing, and not just play the politics of that is, you know, all too available in all
Yeah.
these other places. I mean, clients are always going to have some amount of difficulties, and if we're consultants, we're usually stepping in sometimes because things don't work well, you know, and we're there to help and serve, and that's one thing. But to have, you know, your team be solid and have people you can rely on and that you know and trust. And the other thing I love about our group is that there's a healthy amount of tension. Like, I love it when Corey pushes back on my shit and he lets me push back on his shit. So, sorry, can I swear on this? I guess I should have
Oh, we
asked.
should have
Okay.
asked.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm all right with it.
Okay.
Okay.
Farm girl potty mouth here comes out on occasion, but
I'm just glad it
yeah.
was you first. You know.
I love swearing. But yeah, so I think right now it is just kind of getting
Yeah.
to know us, and word of mouth, and people have seen other people do great work is the main thing.
So, from a like logistical nuts and bolts perspective, does that come through one of the committees that approves membership?
Yeah, so right now, I mean, we just have the main committee, which is everybody approved the members, and we don't have like a process for approving like initial members, like what we call provisional members. So we kind of group them. We have external members, people who just want to freelance and maybe they don't want to step into Delve like that closely, but they'll take some work, take a contract or so, and that's cool. That's completely fine, right? And then we have people who have like said, hey, I would like to get further into this. I want to help out in some committees or whatever. Those would be like provisional. We don't like vote on those. We vote on the full members, which are the people who are going to vote. So at that point, we have like enshrined into our operating agreement, which is our laws essentially, that you have to have your LLC stood up. You have to have these check boxes. You've had to have gone to like a certain number of committee meetings and been involved in all those kind of things, just so you know what you're getting into. You've kind of read the docs, as it were.
Got it.
And there are a lot of docs, in case anybody's wondering.
So, when it comes to the work that's involved for members that join, is there anything resembling the consulting firm concept of bench, or like how does portioning out billable hours work?
Yeah, so it's based off of availability. I think one thing that we really want to strive to, and really thanks to Angela, is we want to get to the point where we have enough runtime that we can say, Delve can pay contractors for 6 months, can pay contractors for a year in the future. That way we can do some of that, and we, it wouldn't be bench necessarily, but you have the run rate in case clients don't pay. And then on your own side, which is another good thing about everyone being freelancers, having your own business, you get to have that same fiscal responsibility of, you should keep yourself in business, right? And so if you can still pay yourself through your business because now you're making more money, now you're, hopefully paying less in tax because you're taking advantage of some of the business things that can help you with that. You can have your own, 6-month runway. So just because we hit a law in the business or anything like that, which is going to happen, we're services industry, right? You're not necessarily having to go immediately back into the enterprise, which is one thing I've always been scared about. Angela, you want to add something?
Yeah. So I don't think right now. So what Corey's vision is potentially very far out.
Oh, yeah.
Right now, what we have is everyone is expected to have between the 6 months and 12 months of funding for their own business. Like, that's one of the big things, if for those of you interested in freelancing, that I feel like is super important to understand, is that it's worth it. You get a lot more autonomy, but it doesn't come without a cost. And some of those things that you have to do very differently is managing your money. So the thing that we have in our short-term view is the ability to hopefully cover like for again, I'm learning a lot of this too, but when clients pay, when you submit an invoice to a client, and then sometimes at the time they pay you, even when you have certain agreed upon timeframes, they have a hard time adhering to those. So we want to make sure that when our freelancers or consultants submit for money, that we can pay them as soon as possible, and then the collective can float whatever amount of time it takes them to actually get that receivable in. So, if there were an opportunity we'd have to be very, very well funded, which is entirely possible with the skills and the people that we pull in to be able to do kind of like to cover a bench, but it's not anywhere in the near term, that's for sure.
No, unless they're covering it themselves, right, with their own fiscal responsibility. Yeah.
Right.
So with the membership, is it typical for folks to be dedicated more or less full time to work through the collective, or do a lot of people have their own contracts that they're taking on, or is there a mix?
I think it's a mix.
Yeah, right, it's totally a mix. And it will be. Like, the other expectation I like to set with folks is that the collective is probably going to provide you not all of your projects, but some percent of them. So, having that expectation is important. Like, not everyone has to pull all of their clients through the collective. Now, if they're pulling in other committee members at that point, we're like, hey, now you're like coming in and you're using other people that are already here, like, please, let's like run that through the collective. But if you just had like a one-off project and it didn't make a lot of money, or you were like helping out something, like, it's totally fine to do that on your own. So it really varies. Like, the other thing that might be helpful to know is there's such a wide variety of needs. And if the Delve Collective, if it exists to be able to help people live the lives that they want to live. Like, we don't get to live the lives we want to live if our work isn't outstanding. But that means for some people, like, having to take care of a parent and they want to, work a certain portion of the day, maybe 20 hours. We have other people who are trying to build a home and they're like, give me all the hours. Like, I want to make sure I can like pull it in. So they're working definitely more than full time. So, if even if the Delve Collective is something that helps people step into another lifestyle or another market, like, that's fine. If it works for the people that are there and they're doing the great work, like, it doesn't matter if it's full time or part time or not.
Speaking of which, I guess, flexibility of schedules, like, I'm kind of segueing into this idea that I find really cool, which is that there are resources here for people, right? Like, so it isn't just that you're bringing in leads and bringing in work for them, but you're also potentially offering people resources and teaching them how to conduct business. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah. Cory, you've done a ton of work there. Like,
I mean, I think some of the biggest things is like, getting people to set up correctly. I mentioned, like, we have a strong preference for people work with their own LLCs. A big part of that is, crack down on gig work. Freelancing is still very much in that gig economy space. And with, laws and rulings changing some of that, we want to make sure we're in the clear. We're not going to be, overstepping any IRS rules or contract law rules, right? So we try and keep it like that, and show people how to set up. And then on, beyond just your LLC setup, we have a whole, like, getting started with freelancing README doc, which goes into some of our preferred, like, vendors and hey, you can set up this such and such bank account. We really like Relay. We found that one to be really awesome for us. And it's software like that, invoicing software, all the things you need to really get started, time tracking software. We all have opinions on, what's the best one that is there, but we have, all those lessons learned of what works, what doesn't work on those softwares and how to get started. So trying to lower that barrier of entry so you don't have to figure all that out, right? Because I said it earlier, one of my biggest mistakes or whatever was I didn't feel like I was ready to have people be contracted under me. If I would have done that, the collective probably would have started a lot sooner, just in terms of resource sharing.
Yeah, the other big resource that we have that I didn't realize how valuable this was is we have a contract vehicle. So if we start up with so one example, we're about to go in and support a startup. We have a contract vehicle where only one person will be associated with it, but that vehicle allows people to get added, like say they get, Series A funding and they're ready to go. It's very easy for them to pull more delvers into their world because we've already set up kind of like the entry point, maybe is a way of looking at it. And that's really valuable for other companies too that want reliable help, and when their needs change, they don't have to go and set up like if we had a 10-person group and we were trying to like work on creating an app, like instead of individually going to all 10 people, we're like, you got it, here's the one person you have to work with, and then we associate everybody under there, and then we kind of help with the billing and stuff like that. So it simplifies getting people like us to be able to work together faster, and which again I didn't realize how valuable that was until much later. Master service agreement, yes, Mark.
So if I think about like it's a lot of years back now, going off on my own, the things that would have been difficult, like is it fair to say that, like, I'm just putting myself, like, say I had just left my last salaried job and I was thinking, how do taxes work, how do quarterly estimates work, and so on and so forth, like what software should I use? It sounds like you have a lot of resources and kind of like opinions. I mean, I think I would find this valuable, even just to have some of the decisions maybe taken off me, like which one of these, invoicing software, like here we have this opinionated take. Like, are you furnishing kind of, or let me ask it this way. It sounds like you're obviously providing a lot of guidance like that. Is it completely structured? Like, is that everybody who comes into our collective will use this particular software or whatever? Or do you just have default recommendations that make it easy?
We just recommend internally, like if you're working on a Delve project, like, we have our Azure DevOps boards, we have, our Discord server where we talk, you'll use those, and we have a Gmail system and G Suite documents, all that stuff. You use those systems. But for your own business, we just gently suggest, at the end of the day, we want you to run your own business, right? And that's really what it's about, is kind of getting those baby steps to where, hey, you didn't like X, Y, and Z project or product. Great, tell us why, and what are you going to use now, right? Because that's the stuff we can all learn from. And then, some people are going to just, I've been using QuickBooks since so-and-so, so I'm always going to use QuickBooks, right? No matter what you put to them, and that's fine. Like, we don't need to standardize that, as long as, we, at the end of the day, provide that like unified front to the client. Like, they get billed the same way, they know how to interact with, the collective, then that's what's important to us.
Sure. What, in your experience, what is it usually that's the hiccup? Like, if people are newly freelance, like what things typically trip them up?
Healthcare and 401k.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, even I still don't really understand like all the 401ks. I'm not unfortunately, I am the tax member representative of Delve Collective, so asterisks here. But unfortunately, I don't really, understand all of that. We have much smarter people with that in the collective than me. So, like, I have like a American Century 401k, and it does its thing. I don't really pay attention. I know that there's only a certain amount that I can put towards it per year, which is based off of how much I actually take as salary. So if I want to put more in, I have to have more salary. I know there's a balance there, but I always ask others, because that's one of my weaknesses. But yeah, 401k and the tax situations, and healthcare, because that's a very personal decision. Like me, I'm kind of like, do I even need healthcare? But that's up to whoever, right? But knowing at least, hey, get started, go look at healthcare.gov and just browse around, right? And I couldn't help you decide what policies or anything. I can't even decide for myself,
I think the other thing that I've seen that I've been kind of surprised by is a lot of folks that we have are newer to freelancing. So, a lot of us are learning together, right? And the ability to hunt for your food, like there's always going to be some of that when you're freelancing. Like you really have to maintain like an online presence, or having presenting yourself in certain ways. Like there's a couple of different stats out there, but the end of it all is that people spend far more time on, like if you're an unknown quantity, they spend far more time online figuring out who you are before they even decide to talk to you. So if you don't have an existing relationship, or somebody can't make like a warm opening, so being able to present in a way that makes you look like you're going to be able to act your wage sometimes is something that, I don't know, it's hard for me. I'm not a social media person, but I'm good at building relationships, and I do that, in my own ways. But like helping other people understand like what it looks like to build your business, and then also to work a pipeline. Like again, we're all learning, and the deals that we're trying to get are ones that involve like hopefully groups of people, that so again we can keep the band together and have fun working together. And that just takes more time than other people thought, including myself.
Speaking of which, the clients, like the winning of business, I imagine is something people are probably wondering about. So when you're a freelancer on your own, you're probably doing one caliber of business, and now you're both talking about doing business with the enterprise. Having a whole collective of people, I imagine, looks a lot different. Generally speaking, at a broad level, what kind of clients are you bringing in, and who brings them in? Like, how does business come to the collective typically?
Ooh, I'll take that one. Yeah, so for the first year, it was mostly me working my network. I've invested a lot in finding people I really like and trust and respect. So that was the goal, was kind of like, let me see what I can get out of there. And we did. We landed a couple of things, which was good. And I planted a lot of seeds, and as I've gotten some mentoring from my friend tour group, those could still prove valuable. It just takes a little bit of time. So within the last couple of months, we moved from like, I'm like, okay, I knew it was going to happen where I would tap out my network to a degree. Plus, I don't know when people are going to be watching this, but the market has just been weird this year in particular. Lots of ambiguity, and certain industries are like going like crazy, and other people are having layoffs, but business is still happening. So the strategy has really changed from like, let me work my network, to let's try to find people that we can partner with, which we've built good relationships with a couple of other firms that we really trust, that have been trained somewhat like us. They have great work. We've also strategized and have been building relationships with people that have in business development. There's kind of two different types of mind frames, if you've heard of a hunter and a farmer. So farmers are great at building existing relationships. Farmers like don't move as much, right? They're going to stay in their field. Whereas hunters are more like, let's bring in the qualified leads and figure out how to like get that to happen. So I am more of a farmer than I'm a hunter, and I'm learning what that looks like in order to do that. So we're leaning, and as soon as I can get a couple of things taken off my plate here, we're going to be building up more of a presence using, we think LinkedIn is probably going to be one of the best places for us to get those qualified leads. And then working them off of there, there's a couple of different tools via Sales Navigator. So we're, any startup does, it takes, anywhere between a year to 3 years of experimentation and figuring out what works. We're trying another experiment and seeing where it happens. But it's been mainly me, but we also have a lot of other really talented folks that have really good relationships, and they've been going out. Like my husband's one of them. He's been doing a lot of reaching out to people and just like, hey, remember how much you liked working with me? Like, anything going on? So, anybody's welcome to bring work to the group if they feel like that's a talent that they want to invest in. And like Cory's mentioned before, we've got systems in place to make that juice worth the squeeze. So, and there have been other folks besides me that are more engineer focused that have literally said, I don't know anybody that would want to hire us. And they've like, oh, somebody came to me and like my friends bring me into this meeting. And I'm like, see, I knew it. It would happen eventually. So, it's kind of been a blend of different things going forward here. But our networks have probably been the tactic that we've all leaned on the most so far.
Yeah, just the existing network, and as Angela said, like I think even me, I'm like that to a perspective. Like I wanted to start a group because I had problems selling group projects, which is what I was interested in. I'm not really interested in like the small, just me solo project, although they can sometimes be nice. But like yeah, just people whether you know it or not. So getting out of your comfort bubble, whether you're farmer or hunter comfort bubble, and doing that, right? Because I think as soon as you open yourself up and start letting people that know, it will spread naturally. Like I'm always surprised by it. So I think people in our who were in that like no space are like, oh, I need help. I got this meeting now, as Angela was saying, which is like good. Yes, that's like the next like step. Like we talk about like enterprise like maturity models. I think there's like a freelancer maturity model as well to be uncovered, and like putting people on that scale based on how far along they are with all their, whether it's just their networking and their pipeline building to their LLC tax situation.
Right. I mean, if this is applicable at this point, like another one of the tools that we put together is like how to build your own pipeline. Like, how do you start doing business development? And every time I get a good podcast or we change something in our HubSpot, like we're trying to make sure that everybody has a resource, like it's a wiki in our DevOps that they can go into, or if they get, people get, I think this is still happening to most folks, but they're getting weird recruiter emails like, hey, are you interested in this? And we've got like a little snippet that's like, hey, I'm busy, but you can talk to Angela. So like, here's how to get on a calendar. So, we've been trying to give people tools and as we're learning things to help them in what business development looks like, because it is a very uncomfortable place. And when you're doing it mostly full time, like I am, it's, one of my friends was like, listen, Angela, it's 80% hitting your head against a wall. Like it doesn't feel like you're doing a lot, but that's exactly what you've got to do. You just got to like get out there and, a certain percentage are going to land and all that kind of stuff. So it's not always fun, but it's a very, very required part of freelancing.
Yeah. I think too, like living with the disappointing things that can happen too. Like, 'cause you could, we were like very sure on some deals and then just random things out of the blue. I'll say like one was like a partnership and one of the partners, had some personal troubles and pretty much fell off the face of the earth, and the other partner couldn't contact them, and that's still like, in HubSpot I put that as like low and moved it back because I don't know what's going. Like I can't control that, but it sucked because it felt like I kind of failed there, even though I had nothing to do with it. It's just how it happened, right? Because I was very sure it was going to land.
Strange.
Is it kind of night and day doing the kind of sales that a freelancer would do versus selling group projects? Or do you get people that come to you with kind of spillover business and say, this is too big for me?
Well, I think we will have that happen. The market, so this is what I've gotten information wise from people in the last year. Anyone that had existing clients was fine. But assigning new clients in services work like we do, that was really hard. So we're going to be at a point where we have spillover. I don't doubt it. And I think that'll happen again. But that particular angle that I was hoping would bring us in work hasn't proved fruitful, but I think it's a matter of time. Yeah, we're willing to wear our partners' jerseys and they're willing to wear ours. It's kind of like the setup that we've set up.
Yeah, but I would say just freelancer versus group work, definitely very different. I think as a my experience is, you tell people you're freelancing, they always want you to do like, hey, this really small project, this really small like side thing, right? Maybe it has an equity connotation. I always say no to anything equity, but then it's like figuring out how you can work within their frame of reference. Like we did a small, very tiny POC that was for a friend of a friend, essentially. Really low cost, but we still fit it within our margin and like made a profit. So it's like taking that type of project, finding somebody who actually would be interested in doing it, even if it's solo, and then just making it fit all number wise, to make it good for everybody, including this solo person who's just trying to make their MVP so they can go demo it to people.
Actually, I'm going to say something I haven't said to Cory before just to make this interesting. No, poor Cory's probably sweating over there. No, in all seriousness, I was wondering, like, maybe using the term freelancer is the wrong term for us. Like, maybe it puts us, because everybody's going to put you, this is a branding thing, right? Everybody's going to put you in a box. It's, you have it, the more you get out in front of it, you can help them define that box, right? So maybe using the term freelancer, as we talk to people out in the market, is one that kind of lessens our positioning in the market. Yeah, I think more like talking about like us as consultants, like we're high-end consultants at mid-rate prices so that we can work with the people that we want to work with. So I think I'm going to change my language around just a little bit more and see, like, again, all these experiments going on right now, change my language and see how like people respond to just talking about us as like consultants. So
I mean, that seems to make sense to me. In all the years that I was doing independent consulting or management consulting, I never really referred to myself as a freelancer, and I don't know if that was reflexive or some kind of subconscious sense of the market position.
Right. Yeah, we'll see. I'm going to give it a shot.
The one thing I definitely wanted to ask here about is the idea of scale. You've gone from small to like, in the teens. What do you think this looks like? Say the business keeps coming in, things keep growing, you keep onboarding new members. Is there do you hit the Dunbar number and you can't get, what does that look like to you scaling up?
Oh, I've got thoughts. Do you want to start
first?
Yeah, I don't really know if scaling up is needed. Like, I think for me, if this were to go down to a smaller number than we have now, but it served the people really well that were part of it and people were getting value out of it, that's the goal. Like, there's a lot of, in the US, we've got these like misconceptions about business. It's like bigger is better and it's all about growth and things like that. But I don't know. Like if it's helpful to the people that find value in it and they're contributing to it, like I don't know if it needs to scale. However, if we do get to the point that like it is working very well, I do think Dunbar's number is probably a really great one to look at. And should we explain what that is? Eric, you brought it up. If you wanted to explain it, I'm happy to, though.
It might be better if you did. I don't want to risk making things up. I remember it. I don't remember what the number is, but I believe it's the number where you can no longer conceptualize everyone in your social group.
Yeah. Yep, that's basically it. And it's I've seen different versions of it. I think like 120 is roughly the number of people and the number of relationships that you can effectively hold and manage as a human. And I find it really interesting for those of you that have ever grown up or lived around Amish folks like I have, that's the number that their communities break off to. That's kind of like the range that even they've oriented around. So there's all kinds of like interesting psychological data around other group sizes and how complexity grows as you get like more and more people. So I feel like for me personally, I've always liked companies that are around 300 or less. I think that those are my happy places. But yeah, I don't know, Cory, how would you answer that?
I mean, I think democracy only scales to a certain point. Maybe that's like a little bit philosophical or whatever, but the intention of being a part of Delve is you help make the business decisions in a real way, whether you're proposing like a business strategy for us to execute, or you're just voting on other people's, right? Like, I think because of the nature of how it's set up, it does have there's a limit. What that limit is, I have no idea. I don't think we're there yet, but I would like to see, you know, a phrase I like is like small groups of friends can change the world. Maybe they only change it for themselves and their group, but I'd like to see like, you know, if we have this honed down and it works, and you know somebody's like, hey, can I start one of these? How might I start my own collective? Well, here you go. Here's everything we learned, and here's all the things to get started and to think about, and you tweak it and you make it your own type of thing, you know. Because I would like to see more and more people come out of the enterprise, leave that mess behind, because it's, you know, whether you realize it or not, it's not financially worth it to you as a person for most people, to be in the enterprise, unless you have like, in my opinion, unless you have like extreme health issues, and they're subsidizing your healthcare cost. You can make more money. You can have way more of a say in what you're doing, and you can find way more personal fulfillment if you do it. So, like, my goal is to convince everyone to leave the enterprise. You know, for better or worse, maybe, you know, all companies just become freelancers, or whatever. But I don't think there's a reason to like tie your identity and your worth to something you don't own. At the end of the day.
We have had a couple of people give us advice and be like, you realize where you're headed, right? And we're like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, you're going to be teaching other people how to do this someday. And I'm just like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to figure out what I'm doing tomorrow. Thank you very much. Like, it's almost like too far out there to conceptualize. However, I've heard that enough. Like, that's the user research in me. Like, I'm just like, I listen for data points and like look for themes, and that's definitely come up. That maybe that is the way we scale, is we teach other people how to do this for themselves.
Maybe 7 people in Delve today, you know, decide, hey, I didn't like this decision. Let's do our own. That's almost the same without this decision. Cool, great, like, perfect. We can partner. We still can work together and everything. That's great. Like, I don't have any problems with that.
Do you think that you're at the point where you would be able to teach a group of people how to do what you've done if they wanted to get out of some large consulting firm or the enterprise, whatever they were doing?
We don't have all the answers, so I mean, you can listen to us, and we can get you part of the way there. You know, with some of our own pitfalls, but then you're going to go through the same thing, which could be valuable to us. So I would say yes, because like we could both fall lockstep together and figure things out. Like, just having like another use case would be like very good for us. Like, oh, you did that and that worked. We're going to now do that, right? Because right now we don't really have that. Like, we look to nonprofits a lot. We look to co-ops a lot, to figure out their structure. And I look at the U.S. House of Representatives a lot, for like figuring out how to do these things, right? But it'd be nice to see other people do something like that, just so I can learn from it. But I could tell you how to get started a little bit. Not that it's going to be right.
I have come across a couple of other similar groups. I mean, they have different angles than we do, so I don't want to give the impression that what we're doing is entirely new. Mm-hmm. But you know, for our version of it, right, has been an adventure. And if people wanted more of our version of it, sure, like we can help it, you know, with the lessons we've learned so far, for sure.
Committees are nothing new. Democracy is nothing new, right? I think the key intersection of those things is freelancers, where I think Angela sees other people as like groups of businesses that have come together and started like sharing some things, whether that's leads or trying to make a network of companies. And that's really, I think, a good way to look at Delve in a way too. It has that same component.
So doing something, I mean, I don't know if it's completely unprecedented, but uncommon. What would you say has been like the biggest challenge or challenges you faced to getting to this point?
Well, I think recently, the past year, it's been like the uncertainty, right? Just where should we be? What is valuable to invest time in? What is important to people, right? Um, and keeping like a group of people who are, I guess, predisposed to being independent, moving along the same path, right, and trying to, address everyone's concerns. And somebody might not have a concern, but then somebody does, and then that concern, all of a sudden, everyone has that concern. You're like, what? How is this a concern? We didn't care about this yesterday. Now it is a thing. Oh God, what do I do here, right? And then how do you address that? That's like kind of the inner workings. The outside thing is still the same thing. I think it's the uncertainty of the market, the uncertainty of starting a new business during this time of high inflation and economic uncertainty. You know, those things are the things that like I worry about.
Yeah,
Angela, what do you?
mine's similar to that, but from a slightly different angle. I think for me, it's been what are realistic expectations, and then to have on myself, on Cory, and then how do we provide that to the team? Like I think the one of the things, like when we hit our year mark, I was like, okay, should we keep going? Like, what's going on here? Am I being too optimistic? What is a reasonable expectation to have? So, and the feedback we keep getting is like, you have some of the most important things that people take years to try to develop. One, we have a high performing team, a lot of trust, a healthy amount of conflict. Two, we have a vision. We have a very focus, like we know why we exist. And a lot of times when things get hard for people in business and they don't have either of those, it's easy to step away. But the feedback I get repeatedly is you have the most important stuff. You're just going through a difficult market, and thinking that you were going to have like all of these things locked in place in a year wasn't realistic. But but
you were naive.
Maybe but for the right reasons. It's still important to maintain that optimism and to be hopeful, but like we probably are on not a year stretch of seeing if this is going to work. It's more like 3 years to really be able to know if it's like the system is going to be like up and running into the degree we want. But I'd rather be going through really hard things with great people any day of the week, and than like being back in an enterprise setting and having people telling me to lie to clients. So.
Or doing it yourself.
Right. To be on your own. Oh God.
Yeah.
Oh God. Yeah.
I guess speaking of that, being on your own, this is kind of open-ended, but as we're coming up on the hour here, I guess I can close with a general question. Like, do you have advice for anyone listening that's a freelancer based, from your perspective of having built this collective?
I think the biggest one is it's not as scary as you think it is. It just means you have to like operate differently, and you get a lot more of your life back if you learn how to operate differently. Unfortunately, we live in systems upon systems, and I think most of the systems that we're taught to work through push us into, get your W-2, get your health care, like just go and work for somebody else. But there are all these other ways and to do things. And, the pandemic pushed me into freelancing. I maybe wouldn't have thought of that, but Cory's, responsible for increasing a large amount of people's income and getting them into freelancing that may not have normally. So, like, don't be as scared. It's not as difficult as you think, but I would also say you have to be at a certain point in your career for it to really be viable. It's not like if you're brand new and junior and fresh out of college, like, man, that would be very difficult to start freelancing at that point. But don't just fall into the systems that you're given. Be creative and look at the other ones that people don't always point to.
Yeah. I would agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think if you're new to freelancing and you've decided upon this journey, I think my advice would be to find that group of mentor friend tours, whether they're doing freelancing or not, just to have somebody to bounce something on. If you join, hit subscribe, or Delve Collective, or you're just listening to good podcasts, or just find something, because you're never going to think of everything yourself, and you're not going to know what opportunities you're missing, or what things could have been like such a big value add to you. It's just the way it is. There's so much that I still don't know, and I don't think I'll ever know. So it's really going and learning from other people, or just being like, hey, you tell me what to do. It's okay to be told what to do, because at least that's like the start of like forming your own opinions, right? And I think why Angela says, if you're a junior and you're just starting like your career, the reason why not to do that is because you need to learn like your own system for finding these things out as well, right? Especially with whether it's you're developing or you're doing design, just learning your building blocks of doing that profession on top of doing freelancing can be probably overwhelming.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to do it myself.
Yeah.
So if I could do it now, knowing what I know, I'd be like, yeah, no problem, but yeah.
It's too heavy of a load to carry. I think the other thing that is a good trick for freelancing is to find people that are both, that do the things you do. So like we built these relationships for people with spillover work. Guess what? Individuals have spillover work as well. So if you're going into it on your own, find other people that you trust that you can share that kind of thing with. Another thing is, like, if you're really good at implementing, finding people that are kind of right ahead or behind you with like whatever that process is that you're part of. So if it's like you're good at implementing, find a really good strategy person. Like, find people that have the complementary skill sets to help like build your network and bring in leads as well. I've seen a couple of people do really well with that type of networking and that type of framing and how they find work.
Yeah, it sounds like thematically, find other people, get yourself in the masterminds, have a mutual referral network. I mean, like, whether you're in a collective or not, I echo that too, that like just throwing something up on Upwork and doing everything by yourself is just an unimaginable slog. I think, having other people in your corner is super valuable. So I didn't leave a ton of time here, but does anybody have any questions? I think you should be able to unmute yourself if you do, or if you want to drop something in the chat. I can't. Oh, I'm in the wrong screen here.
Yeah, I was trying to find the chat myself.
I don't see anybody asking questions here. I can kind of give it a second. Do either of you have any closing thoughts while we wait to see if anything comes in?
Closing thought. I mean, I think we kind of already said it, but and I've said it. If you're on the fence and you have thought about it, just do it. That's going to be my closing thought. Just start it. It's going to be way more rewarding, even if it's scary. You feel like there's a lot of risk. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Closing thoughts. I think one of the things that's helped me out a lot in when I've been unsure of myself, or I've tried to figure out if my strategy is working, is just crowdsourcing things, talking to other people that have done stuff or been through similar challenges, and trying to kind of get good advice. Like, be willing to research in whatever framework that is, and as long as you're not scared of like asking the dumb question or taking a little bit of time to get smart on whatever your new tool is, it's worth it. And there are ways of navigating the difficult parts way easier than I think people expect.
Well, I haven't seen any questions come through, so I guess we can wrap it there. I'd like to thank you both very much for coming on. It's been really interesting. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Nice.
Sorry, I do have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Sorry, that took me a little while to actually figure out how to unmute myself.
It's okay.
So thank you so much for the conversation. It's been really, really nice and very informative. I just wanted to put a little bit of, or rather, ask a question on a different perspective, because I think that for a lot of people, when they start considering this kind of path, it's very common for them to think of like junior engineers or people who are starting in their careers and they're deciding on branching from the enterprise, as you guys have mentioned. But I would like to know, like, what would you guys do if you were in the position where you were, like, you've had 10 years of experience, you've been working on the enterprise for a long time.
Oh,
Like,
Was that the end of the question? Just like what would we do if we had worked for 10 years in the enterprise and then we were thinking of this transition?
Yeah, yeah. Being that like you might have lost the ability of networking or your skills are not as sharp, what would you do?
Hmm.
Wanting to join a collective, right? Because assuming that everybody is the best they can be on their standards, right? And you want to join.
Yeah. I mean, I think like if you're looking at like joining a collective or even finding like your own friend tour group, mentorship group, or joining a place like Hit Subscribe, I think that the thing is to be, and I think everyone will say this, like what drives somebody to want to work with somebody else? Well, it's like being open, transparent, being honest, being vulnerable, and being able to, just have good conversations. Because I think like some of my favorite people that I love interacting with, they're not maybe the best at whatever they do, or they're just starting out. Maybe one day they will be the best. I don't know. I don't think I'll ever be the best at whatever I do myself, but just being able to have those engaging talks, right, and connect on that level, because I think at the end of the day, that's what people really want when you talk about what is work, what is like a job, what is the purpose, right? Like cool money, cool this thing, but there's more to like being a human and being an individual, which is I think the connections, right? Whether it's 120 people or 3 or 4 people, it's finding those connections, finding those people you want to work with. So if you're somebody who's still junior, or you're not sure of your skills, or you're not sure of freelancing, you don't have that enterprise repertoire, I think it's just finding people who will like accept that and bring you into mentorship and just having good conversations with them, right? I think that's what I would start with if that was me. Um,
I think one of the ways that I've been successful in my career and I built my network is, again, I look for people that are very good at what they do, exceedingly kind, and want to do good with their time on this earth. And then I also give a lot. I help people a lot. Like I don't have a ton of money in my bank account at the moment, right? But I can give a lot of time. And for the last 10 years, I think that you have things to give at 10 years down the road, right? Like, and there's always ways of kind of connecting with folks and asking what they need help with. And sometimes it's very small things can be really beneficial, but like ask people that you see maybe that are those three things, what they might need help with. And then be open to learn and try to build up that network. There's all these ways of finding jobs in the world, and you can play the standard game of putting your resume into a thing and going through the resume parser. But it's better, I think, to find the good people, and good people know good people. So, taking that time to build up your network is probably the first thing at 10 years in that I would say. And then asking, how you can support somebody or how you can pay forward the support that you've gotten to other people. Those things come to mind too.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I want to add something because Angela, I don't know if you remember this, but when I was leaving Accenture, and I think you were already out the door, and you're like, Cory, don't you need to network with these people? You can't just burn all these bridges. I'm just saying this completely as this isn't something you should do, but what did I tell you, Angela? I was like, no, I'm burning everything. I don't want to talk to anybody ever again. I'm going to go work in a different country. I'm going to go work in a different state. I'm going to find my people. So if you're at a point of your career where you just aren't even sure, like, hey, I didn't like working with some of these people. I went through that too. Has that, come back to bite me since, our tech is a kind of smaller community? maybe a little bit, but I think you can find other people. Delve really started from that kind of overflow work, honestly. So, like, and that was way outside of Michigan. So, not to burn bridges, but if you're in that situation, it kind of worked out a little bit for me. There were consequences, maybe. Just gonna throw it out there, you know.
Oh, I've burned bridges before too. Like, yeah, there are certain people I don't ever need to work with again, and I'm okay with that. But really, if you wanted to get into a collective, find somebody, start a mentoring relationship, let them see your skills. Like Cory's saying, like there are definitely ways to do it. But I think we might be a little over time. I don't know how long you want these to go, Eric. That's a good question, though.
Specific to be, but I mean, just as long as anybody has questions, I'm game. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Please.
Yeah. I will say one thing that I thought was really interesting recently. We had somebody come from not in any of our networks, just request a meeting, and then was like so passionate about the work. Like this guy was showing me his work, showing me prototypes, showing me what he was interested in, and I'm not exactly that easy. I don't have a big online presence. He found me because I sponsored like an open source GitHub project, and he's like, I want to talk to this guy because he's sponsoring this project I like. And I was like, okay, this guy's so passionate, Angela. You have to talk to this guy. I was so like blown away by the amount of passion. Like, so just even without, I think he's good. I haven't worked with him, but just his passion was like, oh yeah, like spark something. And I was like, gosh, how is this? You just never know. So just don't even be afraid to cold call, because I was surprised by that level of cold calling.
Yeah. One of my friends gave me the quote, it's important to ask because you never know when you're going to win a yes. Like, right. Don't expect that you're going to get a no. And even if you do get no's, but there's like, the fifth one is a yes, like that's fine. Like it takes time to find those people, right? So don't be afraid to ask for help or share, Any other questions?
I take it not. So I will thank both of you once again. It's been fun, and we'll get this up on the YouTube channel as well here at some point shortly. But thanks again, and have a good one, everybody.